Namaste.
I went to Cudahy.
Was it fun? Did you get any sausage? I've always thought that the story of the 10 virgins, which is sometimes called the story of the 5 wise and the 5 foolish virgins, should be called the story of the 5 dummies and the 5 bitches. Because there's no way you can look at this story at face value and make it come out okay. There's no way you can look at this story at face value and be really comfortable with the idea, as is usually the case, that the bridegroom is either Jesus or God. Because what you have is a story of selfish people. Now, yes, in the old days, if you wanted to see in the dark, you didn't have a flashlight, right? You had an oil lamp. And the oil lamp looked a lot more like a little miniature teapot than what our oil lamps looked like. It had a little spout, it was a little clay thing, they weren't very big, and a wick in the top, and that's what you used to see in the dark. And as you might imagine, you didn't see very far with them. And they didn't hold much oil either. I've seen these ancient oil lamps that were probably that big around at their widest and were probably that tall at their tallest. So maybe a half cup of oil or a cup of oil. And sure, the one group of the 5 virgins brought the jugs of extra oil with them for some reason. And the foolish ones supposedly didn't. And why 10 virgins are going to a wedding and interested in the bridegroom's arrival is a little bit beyond me. Doesn't he already have a fiancée? I'm not exactly sure. But as the story goes, 5 of them run out of oil. Now this is more or less 30 of the common era. It's not 2014. So the 24-hour Walmart is not down the street. And yet, the supposedly wise virgins send the foolish virgins off to buy more oil in the middle of the night, which number 1 was dangerous because there would be robbers on the road. Number 2, the oil salesman his store was not open in the middle of the night, so what's the point? Apparently they come back in time, and now the bridegroom won't let them in. But if this was Jesus, wouldn't he have said to the supposedly wise virgins, share some of your oil with the dummies so they can move around safely? And I think anytime we come across a story in the Bible that sets up like that, the first thing we know is that you can't look at it literally. Because it's
Can't look at it
literally, yeah. It's not meant to be seen literally. It's more of an allegory. Now, of course, that doesn't stop a large number of churches from insisting that it's literal, and if you're not ready, when it comes time to go to heaven, well, you're just out of luck. And the best thing the people who are ready when it's time to go to heaven can do to those of you that might need a hand is just to kick you in the forehead so you can't get in either. So it's really, it cannot be, in my opinion, about that at all. And it cannot be literal at all. What it might be about is preparation. But not the kind of preparation that says, have I packed enough stuff in my suitcase? I'm one of those travelers that always takes too much stuff when I travel. You know, your socks might get dirty, so you need an extra pair of those. And then what? And so I end up with much more than I need. And I know other people who have traveled through Europe for 3 weeks with one of those garment bags with just 2 suits in it. And it was a business trip, they'd send 1 suit out to get clean while they wore the other one, and just kept going back and forth like that. And to me, that's absolutely terrifying. But the 5 foolish virgins are kind of like that guy. They travel light, they move fast, and they don't anticipate what might be coming. On the other hand, supposedly the wise virgins must be like me, because it sounds like they have one of those 5-gallon buckets of oil. You know, each of them, and they're over the top. And that first reading, whenever there's a story like this, I try and find a reading from an Eastern tradition that maybe provides a little balance, that maybe provides a little insight into what's going on. And we keep hearing from Buddhism about the present moment, the present moment, the present moment. And there's a sense in which, if all you're focused on is what you need right now, you might be one of those 5 that's out there literally sitting in the dark because you didn't stop to think about what you might need later today. I don't think that the spiritual journey is about this practice that so many medieval folks were engaged in, because they had this belief that since baptism, according to belief, wiped your slate clean, the best thing you could do is wait until the last minute and be baptized on your deathbed. And then hopefully you did your best for the hours that were remaining. Hopefully you were too incapacitated to sin, and you would get into heaven. And because you'd had this slate wiped clean at the last minute, it didn't really matter what you did before, right? So you could run around burning and pillaging and stealing and looting, and it just didn't matter because you applied the get out of jail free card at the last minute. I don't think that's the answer either. I think the wise virgins are wise because they're prepared. But I think, like so many other people who think they're wise, they aren't very compassionate. If you've got more than enough oil, you could share. If there's 10 of you and 5 of you have lamps that are working, couldn't you walk in pairs? Maybe there's something here that tells us about what happens when we start to think we've got it all figured out. And there's also something that happens when we're too happy-go-lucky, too carefree, too focused right now, even though there's benefit to that, and never stop to consider what might be coming down the road. I think there's a difference between being preoccupied with the future and considering the future and preparing for it in a responsible way. People who are preoccupied with the future are the people that are always worried about what if. You know, what if my car breaks down? Now, you could be super prepared and buy another one right now, even though you don't need one, so you had it there ready to go. That'd be a little ridiculous, right? Or you could just worry about it, and when it finally happens, say, see, I knew it. Instead of recognizing that there's going to be good things and bad things that happen. The reading from Tiny Buddha, when he says in the 4th paragraph, I may not have gotten everything I wanted, but I wanted what I've gotten more often than enough to compensate. The unknown may have provided some heartache, but it's also provided adventure and excitement. I think in the end, the virgins are about the middle ground.
Well, what?
The middle ground. That you can be as prepared as you want to be, and still some bad stuff is going to happen. You can be as prepared as you want to be, and it still matters how you're going to treat the other person. One of the advantages of being prepared is that hopefully, if you come across somebody in need, you can help them out. And you can also, like the supposedly foolish virgins, who I think were probably more like the happy-go-lucky virgins, if there is such a thing. They're happy-go-lucky along, and yes, they're not bound by all these worries and all these concerns, but they're also not reasonably prepared for things that might happen. And I think the balance is in the middle. After all, why did the bridegroom not let the virgins that ran out of oil into the wedding? Was it because they weren't prepared? I mean, that's traditionally how it's told. If you're not ready, God won't accept you. Or was it because of something much more practical, that by the time they scampered into town and waited until the oil salesman opened, and then it would have been sunlight, they wouldn't even have needed the oil, right? They could come back out without it. Maybe the party was just over.
Right.
You know? Maybe the biggest Polish wedding in the world only lasts so long. And maybe there comes a point where you just miss the boat. And in this case, I really don't believe the boat is anything about heaven or salvation, whatever that is, but rather it's about finding a way to negotiate life that's in the middle, where you do what's reasonable, where you still enjoy life, you're not so preoccupied with what might happen that you don't enjoy what is, and you're willing to look out for others. That you don't find yourself in this place where you're so sure you have it all together that you don't want to lose any of it. One of the first Japanese Zen teachers to come to the United States was D.T. Suzuki. And he wrote a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And what he said was, the expert believes that he knows everything, and so his mind is closed, and no new information can get in. The beginner knows that they need to learn, and so their mind is open, and they accept new things and continue to grow. I think you could say the same, well, wisdom and expert kind of go together. If we're going to really successfully negotiate the spiritual journey, we're going to have to be willing to shift and change. And as we learn new things and see new things and are called to new perspectives, we can't be afraid to step out and move when we need to move. I talked to a woman the other day who had grown up, I believe, Roman Catholic, and now attends a Bible church. Now, of course, that makes me a little nervous, but that's okay. But the important thing was that she saw that what she was doing didn't fit her circumstance, and saw something she thought fit her life situation better, and had the courage to make the move. That's the middle road. That's being flexible. That's not being rigid. And I think if we can draw anything out of this rather confusing story today, it's that old adage that the truth is always in the middle is probably a good one to hold on to.